Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to be here. Today I'm going to be talking about building an Appsec or application security program from scratch. As you said, I'm going to be mainly telling stories. Those stories are based on my past experiences in different companies. And I'm going to be sharing mistakes, lessons learned, and I hope you can see something that you can maybe take back to your organization, or maybe something that you can avoid, hopefully. And I hope that sounds exciting. So let's get to it. First of all, that's me. Hello. As it was just shown, one of the first things that I learned when I went to live abroad is that apparently I have a weird name. So I left a bit of a pronunciation guide there for you all. That's Mireia. And I'm an application security engineer at a fintech called Pipro. I'm also certified, and that's my Twitter account. I'm not really active there or anywhere else, but if you have to contact me, don't take it personally if I don't answer in 3 months. I promise I'm going to answer eventually. And so let's get started. I said, right, how to build an Appsec program from scratch. So first of all, what is actually Appsec or application security? I left a bit of a description there for the people who don't know the concept. But this can have a lot of different phases, and I left some of the ones that I could think about. And you reading this may be thinking those actually have specific roles, like a security architecture person or a security awareness person. Of course, if the company has enough security people, then there's always specific roles that can be filled. But I would say those are things that me as an Appsec person at some point had to take care of. So keep that in mind. And on the same lines, we might have this perfect image of what an Appsec program has to look like maybe the processes that have to be in place, how the relationship and the communication with the developers looks like, the specific tools that have to be in place, right? Like SameGrep, checkmarks, right? Like the whole spectrum. Maybe you already have this is how the perfect application security should look like. But this is not always possible to actually implement, because we may join an organization and there's already pre-existing processes, or there's organizational requirements from compliance, from management, and we cannot always just discard those processes. And also, each company is completely different. They have different focuses, different sizes, different culture inside the company. So what I'm leading at with all this is that each Appsec program, and specifically each journey to building this Appsec program, is completely different. And what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be telling you about different parts of my Appsec journey. I'm going to be telling 3 stories specifically. Each happened in different companies in the past that I was in, and each one is going to explain a different aspect of application security that we did not have or we were not doing properly, and we had to get better at. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the vulnerability path. Here I'm going to be sharing about vulnerability management, this centralized place for visibility of our security posture in the company. We didn't have that at that point, and we needed that. So how did we get there? Then I'm going to share the Pentesting journey, which I think we all know that Pentesting cannot be the single tool that we have in an organization, the single security tool in a process. However, it is still a really important one. And at that point, we were not really good at managing those pen tests or at performing those. So how did we get better? And finally, I'm going to share the culture shift, which in here, a lot of different aspects are going to come together. There's going to be all this securing the development life cycle, shift left, tool adoption, and then on the other side, also security culture. And all those things are going to come together in what I think is a beautiful story. So let's get started. First, the vulnerability path. I'm going to be talking, as I said, vulnerability management. So where do we start? Basically, we had nothing. Everything we had were just a few tools scattered around our environments that we could, of course, pull data from. So if an auditor would ask us for any data, or a critical incident like a Log4j occurs, we can actually get this data and remediate and be secure. But we are missing this centralized point for visibility, right? We have a few pieces of a puzzle, but we do not have the main vision. So we had to do something. And at that point, we did not have many resources. So we just had to start with what we could. And that's what I call the Jira experiment. In the Jira experiment, we basically pull data from those tools that we had into Jira tickets. Then the security team would gather, would try it through all those tickets, and would try to filter false positives, see which ones maybe are not so critical, not so relevant, and then we would just push the rest of the tickets to the developers. This did not work. It's called experiment for a reason. And yeah, what happened here is that the developers were getting so frustrated by the huge amount of vulnerabilities that were going their way. Also, we spent so much time triaging this board that was getting like overwhelmed with tasks and tasks and tasks. So actually, we were not having a centralized place for visibility like we wanted. We actually just had kind of like an intermediate layer between us and the tools that was actually kind of like removing visibility from us and making things harder. So at that point, we had to take a really hard decision, and we stopped the vulnerability management process. Now, jokes aside, that was actually really, it felt like a step back, right? Like we were really failing at this. Now, actually, what we accomplished by pausing this process is that we managed to put some distance between us and this whole big vulnerability management process that we needed to implement. And we were able to identify an issue that if it was not fixed, it would actually end up making the final result not as clear. Like we would not actually get this visibility that we were expecting, right? And what that problem was is the amount of third-party vulnerabilities that were arising from base images. If this was not fixed, the final visibility place would just be flooded with noise. So we were like, okay, we cannot tackle the big challenge right now, but let's go solve this. And the way we did this is with golden images. Now, these golden images were these standardized patched images that a team was maintaining and other teams could use as the foundations for the systems. This was great, right? Because we managed to standardize something across the whole company, which make everything easier for the developers, more consistent, at the same time, more secure. So that's everything you want, right, in life. And yeah, so this was great, but we still needed this vulnerability management system, right? It was a pressing issue. And yes, so at that point, we took a strategic decision. Some of you are not going to like that, but we just hired externals to do that. Now, of course, this is an investment and it's not for everyone. However, by hiring these expert people that knew what they were doing, we managed to put all the organizational structure inside the vulnerability management tool. So now we could see the domains, we could see the teams, we could see the projects. We saw who has ownership of what. We can filter by criticality. We can filter by environment. We can filter by who has skipped their SLAs, like all of this. And it was beautiful, I tell you. And yeah, and by hiring these external people, what we managed to do is we didn't overburden our internal teams. We basically managed to not derail other critical security work that we would have to drop off in order to accomplish this. And let's be honest, we would have done it way slower and way worse. So that was great for us. Now, that's the first story. Short one, I think. But basically here, right, we started with having nothing. And we reached a point where now we have a vulnerability management system that can stand the pass of time. Of course, there's always work to do, but I think we did a pretty good job here. So, let's go to the second story. Now, on the pentesting journey, as I said, we started on a point where we were having pentests, but we were not managing those properly, right? So where do we start? Chaos. It was, I think everyone has this picture in their heads, the scramble before an audit, the compliance team just asking for a pentest that needs to, everything else just needs to be dropped, all the security work, or maybe the development teams as well. They have to release a feature tomorrow and they need a pentest yesterday and everything has to be dropped just to meet their deadlines. Now, this was not just bad, it was completely unsustainable. So we decided we need to do something. Now, the first thing we did is nothing revolutionary. You're not going to be enlightened by our ideas. However, we just created a calendar. Now, this calendar had everything just scheduled, right? Like all the pen tests that were coming out, the ones we knew that were coming for compliance reason, the ones, that just we knew from the critical applications in the company, etc. Now, of course, this is a really easy solution, and it did not solve our problems. However, by doing this proactive planning, we managed to identify the two issues that were not allowing us to properly and effectively manage the pen test. And that was first, lack of resources. So even though we had this nice calendar and we knew where things were coming out and we were trying to plan our workloads accordingly, if we didn't have enough people, like we still could not do the pen test, the security work still needed to be dropped off. So that was an issue. And the second one is the lack of visibility. So even though everything was so carefully scheduled, so nicely put, new things were still popping up and everything had to be moved, like postponed. So still, that was not solved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first try to solve the lack of resources and then the lack of visibility. For the lack of resources, which you saw before, what do we do in these cases? External help. Okay. Now this was not supposed to be a long-term solution. It was just while we managed to build other aspects of our Appsec, right? Like more foundation, automations, etc. We just needed this extra hand. Now, what I think is really interesting here is that when introducing this new process, what we wanted to do is formalize it, right? We were realizing that a lot of times there were many questions coming up every time a pen test arises, either from the pen tester, from the security team, or from the developer side. So what we did is we created a technical pen testing guide that would try to solve all the issues that are here, all the questions that could arise at some point. So we had all the different systems and applications that we could find in our company, and all the types of different pen tests that we could do on those systems. And then we just tried to set guidelines, set tasks, what needed to happen, who needed to ask that, what to who, right? All of this. So we knew every time a pen test was coming up, we knew exactly what needed to happen. And that just made everything faster, smoother, and more consistent. So that was it for the lack of resources. And for the lack of visibility, as I said, right, we realized that we have a disconnection from what's happening in the rest of the company, where we're missing something. So the first thing we did is let's ask the tech leads, the people who know what's going on. So we sent forms to them, and so we asked things like, what pen test did you do in the past? What pen test do you need in the next half a year, 1 year? Are there new applications coming up? Do you have any new features, any new rewrites, etc.? And the results were just like eye-opening, honestly. They didn't know if they needed pen tests. They didn't know if they had any pen tests. We didn't know about many of the things coming up. So that was, But then what did we do? Okay, so we have to solve this, and the way to solve this was through internal communication. In this case, it came in two different sides. First, we collaborated with the compliance team in order to set policies that set clear expectations and clear marks on what applications need to be pen tested, how often, all of this, right? So teams could know exactly if what were the requirements for their applications. And on the other side, we also collaborated with engineering through OKRs. The OKRs are objective key results, and those are shared every quarter with the rest of the company. So each team basically outlines what they are going to be working on on a set of OKRs, KPIs. There's a lot of things around this. And so what we did is we made ourselves a part of this process. So the teams who were presenting the OKRs, we basically attended to all of those, and we knew basically what was happening in the company. If we know which OKRs teams are going to be working in each quarter, we know what's happening. If we do this consistently for a long time, then we just know everything that's happened. Ideally, there's always things coming out, but that's the idea. And then by doing this, we're also able to put security a bit earlier in the development process. So maybe there's an OKR from a team saying that they are going to start working on a new application. So maybe we can already ask them, like, hey, in 2-3 months, maybe we can have a chat. We can see, right, if we can pen test this, or maybe you can already start incorporating the security tools. You can already put some pressure. And then they also could see our OKRs. So they would see what we're working on, and they could not ask us about doing so many pen tests because they knew what was happening. So that was the second story. And basically here, I think that's a tough one, right? Because you always need some kind of resources. It's either money or people, but you cannot automate this 100%, I believe. Please tell me otherwise later. But yeah, so I think that we managed to do a good job at getting way better at this, managing and performing those pen tests. So, last story, we made it. I really think this is the nicest one, so I hope you like it. But as I said, right, I'm going to be talking about securing the development lifecycle and security culture, all of these together. So again, this is a bit like local code, pipeline, and final product. It's maybe a website, maybe an image, maybe a configuration. It's not supposed to be accurate, so don't follow up on this, but it is there. So where are we starting? The teams are basically owning what's happening in their pipelines. So they may have some tests, they may have some quality checks, and then sometimes they also have security checks, hopefully. And they have maybe, I don't know, OWASP top 10 checks. They have some tools that they found and they like. And then, of course, at the end, the security team, we have some tools deployed. We have some pen tests, etc. This was not working for us. And the reason for that is that, yes, the developers are owning their own security, which should be the final goal, actually. But they have no guidance. They have no knowledge on how to do that. They are, after all, not security people, right? So they do not know how a secure app looks like. So yeah, that was not working. And on the other side, the security team had no visibility. So we didn't know which applications were critical, where the risks on our organization lay. We didn't know which security measures were in place. So at that point, that's everything we could see. We need to have visibility. We need to have control over this. So what we did is we started with security gates. Now, some of you might be familiar with the security gates concept. Basically, it consists on having specific tools, specific checks on points in the pipeline that doesn't allow vulnerabilities from going forward, just like a gate. It doesn't allow the code from going forward. It does, in our case, if there's critical vulnerabilities. Now, what we did for this, we did so much research. We tried to find the best tools that would be good both for the security team, like they provide us good metrics, they gave us the information that we needed, but also they were good for the developers, right? They integrated seamlessly with the tools that they were using already, or so we thought. Spoiler. So then we created a proof of concept and we just asked the teams, please integrate this. Now, this does not work. And I'm going to take you through a little dive demo on why this did not work so that you can feel a bit the pain with me. So here we can see a pipeline with the security gates, right? We asked the team to implement them. They implemented them. Amazing. All good. Now, we go to the next team. Let's move to the next team. And we realize that they have a different pipeline, like really different from the first one. Okay, that's fine. We can handle that. Let's try to adapt this. We work with them and we managed to secure that pipeline as well. Okay, all good. We're safe. Now, we go to the next team and when we are looking at the other team, these teams at some point, something breaks, they really need to deploy, they just bypass the tool. They're like, yeah, that's not for me. Now, luckily, we catch that, so we managed to put more gates, but they just kept going on and on and on. And I think there was a moment they were like, that's it, we cannot do this anymore. Now, what you saw here were two main problems. First, not all pipelines were as standardized as we thought they were. So, like each team, in order to integrate the tool, they had to do so much effort in like changing the proof of concept, the previous teams, all of this, right? So, this was not what we wanted, of course. We didn't want to put more work on the teams, so this was not ideal. And then also, the teams were not all teams, of course, but they were bypassing the tools sometimes when it was inconvenient. And from the security point of view, if a tool is bypassable, it's just useless. So we spent so much time trying to make the tool non-bypassable, like you saw before. That was too real, actually. So it was like more real than I would like to. So at that point, we decided we cannot do this anymore. The more we're pushing, the more resistance we're encountering. And we changed our approach completely, and we decided to start tracking security metrics. Now, security metrics are basically, we track different graphs on different aspects, like, for example, tool adoption or vulnerabilities. And we gave this information to the teams. So basically, they could see how they were doing inside the company in comparison to the rest of the teams. Always without pointing fingers, without saying, just so you know, your team is the worst. But we never did that. But, so, for example, this would be one of the graphs that we could show the teams, right? In this case, this shows the percentage of repositories with software composition analysis gate per team. So basically, how many repositories per team have a tool that's scanning for third-party vulnerabilities. In here, we see the teams are at the bottom, and Team Strawberry in the middle is doing an amazing job at integrating a tool that looks for third-party vulnerabilities. So, yay, good for them. And then something else that we could track, for example, would be the amount of third-party vulnerabilities that the teams have in their systems. Again, Team Strawberry in the middle is doing great at that. Now, this is not always one-on-one, but there is a clear relation between those two graphs, right? Teams can see that if they have the gates and they have these tools in their pipelines, they're just gonna be doing great. They're gonna have to spend less effort. At the end of the day, we're not gonna be shoving tickets at them. So that's great. And basically, what we accomplished with that, because we had this centralized page where we had all the different metrics like this. We had documentation like how they could integrate the tools, how they could find the vulnerabilities in the tools or in their pipelines, how we could fix that, etc. So basically, what we accomplished with that is that now security was a visible and shared goal. So everyone could see that security, all the different aspects, right, of the security posture of the company, and they could see how they were doing, how they were improving or not improving, making worse the security of the company. Now, this was honestly life-changing. This was so great. And what we managed to accomplish with this is that now teams were coming to us asking hey, can I integrate this tool? Can you help me with that? How can we make this happen? They were also asking us before, so maybe they were starting an application and they already had this idea, right? These metrics on their heads, and they're how can we work from the beginning to make sure that our application is not gonna completely now change the metrics, right? How can we maybe integrate the tools from the beginning? Or maybe you can help us with some threat modeling, etc. So this was amazing. And then what I think was a really, really big change is that now they were asking us to standardize things, which we had been advocating for so long. And now they were hey, can we maybe have centralized pipelines that all the teams are using? Can we have please? So that was honestly amazing. And then what I also want to say is that we started at a point where developers were owning their own security, but they had no guidance, they had no knowledge. And now we went all the way back to a point where they are again owning their own security, but now they have guides, they know what a secure application looks like. So now they can actually do that. So that's the end of the story. And basically here, right, we went from a point where we are basically the police, just chasing people, to actually working with them and helping them lead their way to securing their own organization. So basically, teamwork. So, those were all the stories. But before I let you all go, I'm just gonna go really quickly over the main points of each one of those. First, in the vulnerability path, we started with, let's just use the tools we have, right? Maybe they are not the best, so we always keep an open mind. We are ready to pivot, but we use them. Now, when this did not work, we found this underlying issue that was, we solved and was able to fix how the future vulnerability management would look like. And finally, we ended up outsourcing and getting this built by expert people who did everything way better and way faster than we did. Then, in the second story, we started by proactively using this calendar that helped us tackle the specific issues that, not tackle, but identify the specific issues that were not avoiding us to manage the pen testing. Of course, that was not the original purpose of the calendar, but by proactively planning, we accomplished that, right? And then we created these technical guides that made all the process of pen testing way more consistent, way faster. Everyone knew what was going on. And finally, we managed to improve visibility and also set clear expectations by collaborating with other teams. Now, on the last one, we started at a point where developers were owning their own security without guidance, without knowledge. So what we did is we gave them visibility, and that showed that visibility drives accountability. So the teams, of course, there's a bit of peer pressure, there's a bit of management pressure. However, by showing the teams what they are doing, they always just want to see themselves do better. And finally, we saw, that was just completely proven, that cultural change is more effective than enforcement. At least in our case it was, and that was great. So, as a last thing, of course, this transformation did not happen overnight, and it's a never-ending journey. Those companies are probably still struggling when getting their Appsec programs way better and were more efficient, all of this. So that was just a really humble experience. I just shared my humble experience of what happened in my past companies, these Appsec talks. And so, of course, I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers. We're still figuring all of this out. And who knows, maybe in 2 years, I'm just I will have learned a lot more, and I will say everything I just said here today was utter bullshit. And if that happens, I just hope I can be here giving another talk and telling you everything about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. You made it sound so easy. Are there any questions? Oh, that's good.
Thank you. It was an interesting talk.
Thanks.
Just a question. Have you thought about placing security champions within the team? So one person is responsible. Well, you educate one person, and this person passes the knowledge along to the rest of the team and is responsible for the security checks per team, but also having chapter meetings between the different teams. So if I am to install a tool, probably the other team also has to do it and goes through the same pain. Maybe we can share knowledge and learn from each other.
Yes, so security champions is usually a really, really amazing thing to have in place, I would say. It also depends a lot on the maturity of the company, right? So if a company doesn't have enough resources, a security champion, I would say, takes a lot, because you have to be really taking care of them and communicating with them really regularly. So on the companies I was, in some we had security champions, in some we didn't. I would say, ideally, I would always like to have them. But it's not always possible due to, as I said, you need a person or several people linked to these champions that can coordinate with them, can actually take their suggestions, right, and try to make everything painless for both teams. But in general, I really love security champions. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the recognizable and interesting story. Am I allowed to ask 2 questions? Or? Oh, perfect. Oh, perfect. Then I can take my time. So the first question I had is, during your security gate and designing the pipeline, did you also include the developers, so ask them for requirements for the pipeline and what they expected from the tool?
Sorry, I did not hear. Did we also include what?
The developers themselves, so ask them what they wanted from the security tool.
So I would say that we learned a lot by doing this the first time, and one of the things that we would certainly have to do the next time is actually involving the teams. I will say, in my defense, that we did try, but of course, when you just go to developers with questions and not with hey, we have this tool and this tool, let's do a proof of concept together, then no one has the time for that, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is, get a set of tools, maybe do a bit of trial, what can be done with each of them, and then involve the developers in that. But what we did at that point was just like, hey, can you help us with that? And that did not work. But yes, absolutely.
Thank you for the answer. And the second question is, in your first vulnerability pod, I thought it was, you said that during the Jira experience, when we pushed the findings to the developers, they overloaded and didn't want to fix them because too much work. We have functionality, go away security. How did this change when you had the vulnerability dashboard? Did they comply more? Did you filter better? Or how did they react to vulnerabilities after that?
So the thing with the vulnerability management is that it's this centralized place for visibility, and you can prioritize way better, right? So we were able to way better accurately identify which were the applications that were more critical, which ones were the teams responsible for that. So we were way more accurately reporting the issues to the teams as well. So this, of course, also helps the team. There's always going to be issues that they don't want to fix, I think, and this is something that we always have to struggle with. Then I guess you could also implement the security metrics, and those two things just come together, and then you have the holy grail, I hope. But so I think that's how this improved the final result.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, she's in the... yeah. Thank you. Traditionally, we are rather protective about vulnerability information. The dashboard looked really great, but how would you implement a need-to-know principle in such a dashboard?
In the vulnerability management, you mean? A need-to-know, you mean like the developers that think the dashboards, or how we send information to them?
The developers, but you set off different teams in the graph. Like, did you publish the graph to all the teams or just management of those teams?
So in the tool that we had, you could just give roles. So basically each team, like the same way that we have these domains and teams, you basically just assign a user to the domain so they only see what's in there. But therefore, I'm not sure if you link that to the graphs when you say graphs, like the ones on the security metrics. Okay, those were actually like two different, but still, like the things that we were sharing on the security metrics were not super specific. So it was, as I thought, like how many vulnerabilities does this team have? So then we just shared like for all teams, and then they can also see how they compare. And I think peer pressure is always good for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for a very nice talk. I know that a lot of organizations struggle with the ownership issue, and it's an engineering problem, not a security problem, but vulnerability management in particular depends a lot on ownership. So I was wondering if you have any lessons learned or ideas around ownership and how to use it for vulnerability management.
You mean like the way, like the moment that you're assigning the ownership, who has ownership, or then that they actually fix it?
No, identifying which team a vulnerability belongs to, which is sometimes not a one-to-one.
Yeah, so in our case, to be honest, we just had like each team, like applications are usually developed by a specific team, so it was quite one-to-one in that case. I can think about it and and then tell you what I would do in another situation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One other question, maybe? Perfect.
Thanks for the talk. How do you deal with, I mean, transparency is super good. Let's just say there's some peer pressure in the groups that they fix their stuff, but it's probably also some backlashes. How to deal with that? Like you make transparent to all the dev teams, like how good they are in comparison with other teams. And some teams would say, I don't want my data published to other teams. So how deal with that?
You mean the security metrics?
Yes.
I mean, as I said, it's not data published in the sense of like we're saying you have this vulnerability, you're not fixing it. It's really general information.
But it's still information that says, hey, we are the worst team here because of the most vulnerabilities, or we have this least security gates accepted. So that's still information that says this is the worst team out there.
Absolutely. So the thing is, we're not only sharing one graph, right? We're sharing a lot of different metrics and a lot of different aspects of their security posture. So a lot of teams are usually doing maybe bad in one, but they're doing better in the other. Teams also have their own struggles, their own features to develop. Maybe one team is actually doing great at infrastructure and they're just doing bad at security, but there's another team which is doing great at security and bad at infrastructure. So the way we always presented this was, first we started telling the company, so to say, that this was coming, and management, everyone was really on board with this. And then we just started at meetings with all the companies, sharing this, as I said, never pointing fingers, always saying hey, this team is doing great. You saw how they implemented the gates, and now automatically the vulnerabilities went down. So honestly, we never had people complaining directly. I don't know if they complain behind our backs, but I would say it's all about how you transmit the information. Maybe if there's a team that you see is really, really doing bad, at some point maybe we had a team doing 3K bulls and the others are at 50, so then you cannot even see what the others are doing. But then you maybe want to approach this team individually, right? Not in public, but just go to them and be like, hey, I see you're doing not so good at this. Do you need a help? Do we maybe need to integrate the golden images? Do we maybe need to integrate, I don't know, whatever processes are in place at that company at that time? And then help them reduce that before the next meeting, right? Or something like that. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I want to clap, but it's not possible.